everybody. We're here at another presentation. Today, I've got an interesting speaker who's joining me virtually. We're going to be talking about digital content distribution and music publishing. So with me here, I've got Blahtee Muchemwa, just to give a brief introduction of who he is. He's an accomplished talent manager and content creator, and would like to have a discussion with him on the sustainable approaches to digital content distribution in Africa, and how we can use scalable networks and PR campaigns for artists to get better media plugging and understand the use throughout his career. I'd like to welcome you to this talk. Blah, how you do?
I'm good, thanks, Eugene. Thanks so much for having me. I really wish I could have made it happen for me to get there, but yeah, a bit more work commitments on my end. But thanks so much for having me. Thanks to everyone else who's joining.
Awesome, man. No worries. We've done it before, and I think it was at Converge, and you had some amazing gems and nuggets to share. So, hey, let's get right to it, man. So let's start out with some information that just benefits people who are getting to know you for the first time. So if you can give us a brief background on yourself, the work you're currently doing, explain digital content distribution, and how it works in very simple terms. You can kick off with that.
Okay, so at the moment, I'm the head of business development at a Canadian-based record company called Chaos Club Digital, based in Vancouver. And we recently just opened an African office here in Joburg. So at the moment, I'm literally in charge of making sure that the artists that we are signing, we create revenue models for them that are going to be sustainable in the long run, and just making sure that their careers are developed to a point that they can become profitable. But prior to that, I was with a management company called Republic 54, which pretty much manages Prince KB, Money Badu, Flame, Victoni. I can go on and on with the list of artists that were on that company. And prior to that, I used to work for a distribution company called Ziki Media, which is basically a digital distribution company, which is where I got to learn a lot of what I guess I can say I know now about the profitability of streaming and of YouTube. And at Ziki, I worked with artists like, Diamond Platinums. We had DJ Ganyani, Mogul, just to name a few. So yeah, that's a brief background. I can take it all the way to when I started, but for the sake of this talk, yeah, I think that is the brief background I can give you.
Awesome. So we're clearly talking to the right person when it comes to this stuff.
So
I'm very impressed, man. I'm very impressed. Look, we've heard so much. I mean, right now we're in the company of musicians. They all know about Spotify, and they all know that people get paid for their music. But can you take us through some income streams, and maybe just share with us the real intricacies of the income streams for music writers and music artists as well? What's the lay of the land?
So that's a very kind of like broad question, but kind of like to narrow it down. I think right now, there are two things that we need to consider. The first one being that we're in Africa. And right now we're speaking to the people in Zimbabwe. So the structure and the structure that's set in Zimbabwe and the structure that is in South Africa already is totally different. So I'm going to try and just kind of like narrow it down to how artists can kind of like then cross over. And yes, streaming is now a revenue form. And streaming can come in terms of like audio and visual. And when I say visual, I'm talking about YouTube. YouTube right now being the most tangible source you can earn income. With streaming, it's still a bit low. And even for some of the South African artists that I work with, we're still trying to get to a place where we can have sustainable profit when it comes to streaming. But, at the moment, I think we can talk about how we can match the digital era and the traditional era, because we still have a little bit of both. that is working. So in terms of like artists, you did mention publishing. Publishing really focuses on songwriters and composers. So if you are, a songwriter or a composer or a beat maker, it's very important that you get yourself registered. I know in Zimbabwe you can register with Zamura. And I also know that if you're an artist that's trying to break into the South African market, you can still register with the CMO called SAMRO. They'll still be able to collect your royalties from this side. The other thing I can think about, man, is from TV. TV, like I've mentioned, YouTube. The other source of income you can actually register with is with Sampra. Sampra is a CMO here that focuses on collecting royalties for videos. So if your music is being played on Trace, on MTV, on Channel O, you can still get that. And another one I just want to throw in there is sync. We're now in the digital era where a lot of people are getting their music on platforms like Netflix or Showmax. So that's another source of revenue as well, where you'll then have to kind of like get in touch with music compilers and music supervisors for these shows. But we can get into that another day.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really broad. For me, what I found mind-blowing was when you said YouTube is actually one of the bigger earners. How has that changed over time? I mean, the common perception is that Spotify or Apple Music is the way to go, and they have the largest audiences. You wanna give more information on the whole YouTube thing?
So regarding YouTube now, I'm gonna have to kind of like bring it back so that we can talk in terms of like territories, right?
Yeah.
In the States, in Europe, in Australia, in China, all of these different territories, we need to consider that things like data are much more accessible, right? And when I talk about data, I'm talking about it in two forms. Data being actual Wi-Fi to make sure that you can log on, you can stream these things. And data being statistics, making sure that you understand the numbers, you understand how you actually can earn and how people pay in terms of like these platforms per point. So the amount that is paid for Apple Music in the United States versus the amount that's paid here is very different, because you now have to consider that, number one, there's a different currency that's been used in South Africa. There's a different currency that's being used in Botswana. There's a different currency that's being used in Nigeria, and it's a credit card system where the people who are subscribing to consume this music are paying via credit cards.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're not at that place yet. I know, especially like in Zimbabwe, because we don't really have like a recognized currency at the moment. So the people who are consuming music on that platform, people who've got access to it, and it's not everyone who's got access to it. So it just kind of like lowers down the numbers of people who can listen to your music on demand on paying platforms. Whereas YouTube is a lot different, because yes, as much as they've got a paid model, right, the points per million streams or whatever are still different, because we're in Africa and we're in the southern region. But the advantage you have is that it's got a higher reach. So in terms of visibility, a lot more people can access your music because they don't really have to subscribe. Literally, it can pop up anywhere. And if people like it, they'll consume it. So in Zimbabwe right now, from some of the studies we've done, we've also kind of like realized that platforms like Audio Mac that are free and YouTube that are free are the ones that are kind of like, doing better in terms of how people can be visible. And also for those who have managed to kind of like pass certain number of million streams, they're beginning to now start seeing some money in YouTube.
Oh, that's incredible. I am really fascinated by this. And I also want to ask some questions on behalf of the young dudes in the audience who are hearing all these abbreviations and terms, and they're like, what the heck is that? So you mentioned SAMRO, and you mentioned CMOs, and you mentioned points per play and things like that. You want to just briefly glide over all of those and just give us like a loose definition of terms just for that 14-year-old rapper?
So basically, SAMRO is a South African music rights organization, kind of like with Zamura, which is the Zimbabwe Music Rights Organizations. CMO are basically the the bodies that are responsible for collecting this money on your behalf, right? So Samuel and Zamura fall under CMOs, which are the bodies that collect this money on your behalf, and they make sure they pay it out to you. So I don't know if there's anything else that I'd mentioned that's kind of like where we got lost there. But I think I just wanted to kind of like create a segue because I know one of the questions that comes up the most is, yeah, how do I get my music on these platforms, and how do I start earning and all that kind of stuff,
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to kind of like get into a bit more detail right now is about creating a database. So if you're an upcoming artist right now, if you have 20 people that are listening to your music actively, that are streaming your music actively, that are following you on social media, the plan or the best way to then become profitable is to make sure you build these communities, because in these communities now, that's where a lot of the money lies. Sometimes we have this mindset of, no, I just need to get my music to 1 million people. But, for you to get to 1 million people, you literally have to take it one step at a time. So for the people that are in your territory right now, how many people are engaging with you, and how many people are you engaging with? Are you allowing people to give you feedback on your music? Are you allowing those conversations to happen? Because we've now moved into an era where, for example, Apple Music have only got what we call banners, right, on the store. Now, for each territory, we get maybe about, I'll say at most 15 banners, right? Out of these 15 banners, this is where your picture comes up. This is where your album art comes up as soon as you log into these platforms, saying that there's new music that's available, right? Now, you as an artist have to think about this. If there are only 15 available every Friday, right? What are the chances of you right now being able to get on those top 15, right? You won't be able to get there immediately until you start actually engaging with your fans, because your fans are the ones who are going to now start making your music travel a lot more faster, right? Because they have other people that follow them as well.
Yeah.
And as soon as the interest now rises, you're able to now actually start keeping this information, and that's the data I was talking about earlier, that you're able to keep this information to yourself and actually see that, okay, from my Apple Music, I've got 150 people that are listening to my music, right? Start studying the back analytics of your distribution, right? Your YouTube, go to your dashboard, see how your videos are performing, see who's listening. If there are people right now in Slovakia who are listening to your music, right? Find out how. Look at the possible ways and means in which those people were able to access your music. Then from there, you can now start building a fan base, because fan bases are the ones that allow you to then start earning. So that's the one thing I wanted to just kind of like, point out, because we can get into all the technical terms of how distribution works or whatever. But distribution actually starts with you engaging with the people closer to you. And then you now start going around and you start building and making sure that more people are getting access to your material.
Awesome, awesome. I was gonna let Keith come in and comment a bit about, or maybe just share a bit about publishing, streaming, royalties, and how all of that works. Keith, you wanna slide on in here and give us your 2 cents on that stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I actually want to ask questions because we've got a music encyclopedia here, so I'm not gonna give my 2 cents where we've got plus. So I'm really gonna just ask questions. So a lot of people are confused between the different types of royalties that are there. Like Eugene just talked about, there's publishing, there's all these things about royalties, mechanical royalties. We hear all these fancy words being thrown around. So when for us in the industry, we know what they mean, but for, like Eugene said, the 18-year-old rapper who's trying to establish himself, he needs to get familiar with all these things. So perhaps if you can just kind of like touch on that and differentiate between the kind of royalties and what to look out for, because a lot of young kids are looking at, okay, I want to get a record deal. I mean, ASAP got signed to Def Jam. And they're like, yeah, I want to get signed to Def Jam. And then when you get contracts and stuff like that, you need to be looking out. A lot of people, will sign off things like their publishing rights and stuff, but they don't even know what that means. So if you can touch a bit on that.
Yeah, so I think, before I get into that, there's a platform we've actually created called Moti, which is Masters of the Industry, right? Where you can get to ask direct questions. So if you Google Moti Africa, MOTI _Africa on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and now we've just recently launched the website. We actually launched it on Monday. It's basically a platform we've created that can answer these questions, because what we've actually now started realizing is that at first we thought that, okay, maybe it's these guys as the artists who don't understand exactly what's going on. But we've also realized that the biggest gap that's there right now is management, right? So for every 10 artists or 15 artists that's there, we've got one artist manager who is not even a quarter qualified to handle all of these things, right? So when it comes to the different types of royalties that are there, number one, you can look at, so we've got what we call mechanical royalties, we've got what we call, we've got mechanical royalties, we've got performance royalties, we've got licensing royalties, right? And basically, just to bring it a step back, when you get into a position as an artist, you get into a studio, right? You compile your music, you compose your music. The first thing you need to understand is what is a composer and what is an author and what is a producer, right? And just to break it down in layman's terms, an author is someone who is responsible, because there are two ways of looking at it, right? There's the author who is responsible for music and the words, right? So each person who contributes, whether you contribute one line or you contribute playing an instrument, whether it's a guitar, piano, or you even play the flute in a song, either way, whatever contribution you make, you need to be compensated. So how this works is that if you're in a studio with a beat maker, you're in there with someone who writes, or you write your own material, right? What happens is that there is this form called a split sheet, right? And in this split sheet, it shows who was the author, who was the composer, right? And obviously, who is the producer. Now we'll get to the issue of masters, because I know that a lot of guys have been asking the question of, okay, so if you do a song and someone produces it or whatever, who actually owns the master, right? The person who owns the master is the person who is responsible for paying or for providing resources to make sure that that song was done. So if you go to someone else's studio and they are paying for your studio time, they are paying for the producer, and they've also paid for the person who's helping you write your lyrics, right? The ultimate person who the song belongs to is what we call an executive producer, and that's the person who owns the masters, right? Now, the second thing is who is a composer, right? A composer is anyone who can come in and write or contribute, whether verbally, right? Because you also need to understand that your instrument is a voice. Your voice is an instrument, right? And music is made up of different instruments. So if you have someone who just comes in and just makes a beat, gives it to you, and then you now work around that beat to create a song, you need to differentiate between a beat maker and a producer. Now, producer is the person who's responsible for bringing all of these different elements creatively, right? To make sure that the song has been well done, right? Then now, author and composer are the people who've contributed in different ways. Now, with these things coming together, right, this is what you then get what you call the record, which is the actual song that you've done. Now, after you've gone through this process of creating that, what you do is you sit amongst yourselves, and out of 100%, you divide. This is for the creative aspect only before we get to the other technical things. Creatively, out of 100%, who has provided and contributed to the making of the song? Once you compile all of this information, you then put it into what we call a split sheet. Now on the website, like I mentioned earlier, we've got this information where we've now done a digital split sheet, right? And we've also done what we call a digital notification of works. Now, a notification of works is the information that you compile that includes the person's name, the person's ID, and basically which CMO, right, collection organization that they're registered to. So if they belong to Zimura, right, what that form does is after you've handed it in, you submit it and it goes straight to the offices either in Zimura or at SAMO. And they get that information and then they put it into their system, right? Now, publishing is the issue of making sure that the music is taken from the studio to the radio station or the distribution platform or whatever new platforms you're going to discover in the future, right? Because like now we've got places like TikTok, we've got social media, we've got Facebook as well, that is also now responsible, and they've actually now have been kind of like put in a corner to now start paying creatives. And for those who have been trying to release music or do videos and, you know, release them through these social media platforms, I think some of the challenges where they either get blocked because they're copywritten or whatever. Now, the reason they get copywritten is because they are published with different record labels or publishing companies, or you can even do it independently, right? Now, once your information, and this is the admin I'm always talking about, that once you understand that aspect and your metadata, right, before we actually get to the release, because with the release, that is now you putting yourself in a position to say, I am now able to earn some money. But there's no way you're going to be able to earn money until ZFM, Star FM, the new TV station 3K that is just launched in Zim, ZTV or whatever can pay you this money without that information. So that process of getting to the studio, right, to getting your music to the market is what we call publishing. Making sure that your metadata is all in one place, right? Now, when you now then start researching a little more, because I think that's the other thing as well, where we've been skipping so many processes, like how do I just get my music there? How do I get my music there? But this is one of the most fundamental and important steps, because once you now get into the habit of actually understanding who owns your music, by the time you get it to the right place of distribution, you'll now be able to understand how much money you can actually get from it. So mechanical rights, performance rights, all of those things now are then explained with the different CMOs. Like I'd said, that SAMRO is responsible for collecting the mechanical rights, which is the music that is going to be on radio, right? And then you've got Capasso, which is responsible for collecting your digital royalties. So anything that you do, whether it's going to be online or YouTube. But now these platforms have also made it easier for you to actually get the money from your distributor, right? But for transparency's sake, these CMOs are responsible for making sure that you're not getting cheated from these different DSP. Then the last one is pretty much like performance royalties, where if your music is on TV, right, you collect from Sampra. They're the ones who are responsible for making sure that Trace submits the information to say that your video played X number of times, right? And from X number of times, this is how much you're going to earn. And what's now easier is that if all the right information is placed, the money is distributed equally according to the percentages, so that we avoid the issue of the money just comes straight to you. And then you just say, I know it's fine, I'll pay them later. I'll pay them later, because these are some of the issues and the challenges we've been struggling with in the past, where all the money was just going to one place and that money was never getting to the right people.
Yeah,
Wow.
we've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Blas. Just a follow-up. So I'm thinking I'm this young 18-year-old rapper, and I've heard all this stuff. It makes so much sense, but I'm thinking, yikes. I don't have the time. I just want to write bars. I want to record. I want to be famous. I want, I want to see what I see on Trace, the flashy lights.
Yeah.
All this just sounds like so much admin. What do I do? Like, do I have to get signed to a record label? How do I find a manager who can, track all these things? What's your advice for someone like that?
So my advice right now is so I'll explain it like this, right? Before you sign to a record label or you look for a deal outside, right? I always equate a record label to being a bank, right? If you are getting into the system of borrowing money, you should be able to learn how to pay it back. So if you start borrowing small and paying back small, by the time you get to a record label, you understand the dynamics of getting money, of which they call it an advance, right? Making sure that you use that money for the things that you said you're going to use it for, and making sure that when it does come back, you're able to pay it back. So right now, the advice that I'll give you is create a team, right? And the most important person you need in your team right now is a manager. Get someone who is willing and passionate to learn about the business. Because like I mentioned earlier, that for every 10 to 15 artists, we've got a manager who doesn't understand the record label side of the business. And the fortunate thing is that platforms like these now have created easier ways in which for people to learn. You and I and Eugene, everything we've learned to date, we're literally pestering people, sitting down with people. Back in the day, we used to just bombard people. If they were in a coffee shop, you would sit them down. If you got their phone number, you would try and call them and set up a meeting. But the internet has created such a broad place for you to be able to learn. The second thing I wanted to advise is, as an artist, understand what kind of artist that you want to be, right? Because the music industry has opened up so much. If you understand that your greatest strength is either being a producer, is either being a songwriter, is either being a performer, there are different ways now in which you can be an artist. And once you understand that, okay, I want to be an artist, I know everyone says that they want to be a superstar, but play to your strengths. So if you are very good at making music and you love the process of I'm in a studio right now, right? If you enjoy the process of making music from the studio, right? Or if you are someone who believes you can sing, you can rap, but you also have assistance, you need assistance in doing that. Understand what you're good at. And then from there now be able to build a small team of people around you who are also as passionate about what you're doing as they are. Because that way now, when your energy sync, it allows you to then learn the different aspects of the industry and be able to apply it all to one project, right? And that's pretty much the head start that I had, that I got into the system because I was learning different things. I didn't get to publishing, I didn't get to distribution, I didn't get to artist management immediately, right? All I did when I started is I used to sit in the studio, try and understand how this song is created. Then from there, I started understanding that, okay, in order for this song to be played on radio, what is the next step? Talk to the guys at the radio stations, understand what formats they want for delivery. Don't just send your music over WhatsApp. Don't also just, send emails and expect people to just kind of respond. Create relationships, because relationships are the ones that are going to be able to get you to the next level. Everything is based around community. Once you start engaging in community and you start understanding how people work, because this is a people industry, right? As much as we're hiding behind keyboards and we're on our phones and all that kind of stuff, you have to be actively on the ground, meeting people, speaking to people, understanding how they've done it before, right? And also willing to apply some of that advice. And once you start getting that little fundamental step right, you'll see how much progress you'll make. Now we've realized that through development, it can take up to about 18 months for you to be a developed artist. And if you actually start walking in these footsteps where you're actually willing to be developed, you'll get there in a good time. And once you're there, you'll understand how the business works and you'll be able to stay at the top for a very long time. So that's my advice. Community, build teams, engage.
Wow. That's mind-blowing, man. That is really, really mind-blowing. It's quite an eye-opener. While we still have a little bit of time, I think we can move on and talk a bit about what is PR in the context of what you do. What is PR and how is it different from good old-fashioned marketing?
Okay, so PR is short for public relations, right? And public relations is basically now the gap between the artist and the media, right? So basically it's a process of pitching and making sure that people buy into the vision of who you are as an artist. And once people start understanding and getting the music, because remember, like I said, you know, when it comes to especially like radio, there are different formats that they want this music delivered. They have what they call music compilers. So now these the PR people are basically the people that stand in the gap for you to make sure that the people on the other side, in terms of media, actually actually receive your music, right? They take a listen to your music, and once they listen to the music, and if it falls in the format of the radio station, the other thing I also wanted to make sure that people understand is that the music you're making is for different places, right? So if you're a hardcore rapper and you know you into trap music or whatever, Radio 2 or Radio Zimbabwe is not where you're trying to get your music played, right? There are stations that are designed to play your type of music. The PR's job is to identify those different platforms and make sure that they plug your music onto those different platforms and essentially create the relationship between those platforms and the artists, because the platforms are the ones that are responsible for now delivering your music to a larger scale. So that's what PR, I'm trying to explain all of these things like in layman's terms without using
you're doing a great job, man. You're doing a great job. It's fantastic.
Industry language. But yeah, it's basically the people or the person who's responsible for getting your music to be distributed on different platforms and creating the relationship between the platforms and yourself.
Yeah. So again, I'm always interested in spotting the cool terms used in the music industry and trying to connect the young guys to those terms. I imagine there are a number of young artists that are walking all over the place with either their flash drive or emailing their MP3s to this person or the other. And you mentioned plugging, right? How vital is that and what does it involve? And how can we get 13-year-old G Gangster 3000 to get the right person to plug his music or his content in the necessary place? What does that process look like for a person starting out?
So, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think now in the digital era, it's become a lot easier. It's the same way you can literally record your music, right? Upload it on your computer or your cell phone, and it goes to Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, Pandora, all these different platforms. Now, plugin has become a lot easier for artists. I know people still want to get on TV, and TV is a platform that has got mass reach, right? Same thing with radio. I think we'll just stick to these two platforms because they're a bit more traditional. Now, for example, with Trace TV have actually created what they call a submission form online. Same thing with MTV Base and Channel O. And the reason I'll speak on these three platforms is because those are the biggest platforms we have that are still dedicated to music in our region. And they also now have different offices in different territories where they then share music amongst themselves. So if you ever wonder, like, how did this person end up in Nigeria or whatever, this is now that process where they get your music, they share it with their other territories. If the other territories enjoy the music, they will then put them up on TV. Now, Trace, Channel O, and MTV have created a form where you can literally go to the website, right? And this is now the important thing about having a team, because you want someone who understands and is researching and is finding out how do I actually get my music there?
Yeah.
These platforms are available. These platforms have created submission portals, right? And these submission portals basically allow you to see the format in which they want the video, what they require for you to submit that video, and how long the process takes from the time you submit the video, the time they view the video, the time they give you feedback, to the time that it then goes up. So it's also still a process that we need to be a lot patient with, because you need to understand that these guys are getting probably 2,000, 3,000 videos a week, not only just from one country, but these are like from different countries. So you've got guys in Zim who are trying to get on Trace. You've got guys in South Africa who are trying to get on Trace. You've got guys in Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho who are trying to get on these platforms. And their job now is to go through and sift through all of these videos, which is why I was saying that in the interim, what your job will be as an artist or as an artist manager is to find a way you can now create engagement so that people, once they also start seeing this TV and they start seeing the video, they can also start sharing it, right? And these platforms will also now start seeing that, oh, okay, there's a bit of a buzz that is being created around this artist. I'm not saying go and spam these guys on social media and now say, play my video, because there are different ways of approaching it. But what they also do is, as much as they go through these videos, they also keep an eye out on what's happening in the different countries, right? So it's very important for you to start in your area and expand, because they also kind of like have a pulse on who's got the biggest song in the country, what songs are being played on the other side, which is either in South Africa, from the different countries. So if you're in Zimbabwe, for example, I'll give an example with one of the artists that I've been working with recently called Hilsey, right?
Sure.
Hilsey has been amazing, right? Yeah. He creates his own music. He's gone as far as, creating his own management team who are dedicated to different areas. And what they've done is, they've been doing a lot of their submissions and a lot of their distribution by themselves. And, I also managed to then get in contact with Hilsey because I'd actually seen the community and the engagement that he had already started on Twitter. So by the time I reached out to him, he had already created a fan base, right? So what my job then became was to create that gap between him as an artist and him with the platforms. And I then took the video, took it to the different platforms, and then plugged it, right? And from there now, and I'll give the example of the song that he did with Gary that then, got the award at the Afrimas, because that was such a case study for even us guys as a company, that the process of getting it to one station at a time and them now then passing it on to their different colleagues in the different regions, the video was now able to get to Nigeria, and the guys in Nigeria now started consuming his music and going back to other music that he was doing and he was releasing, to a point where people like the Afrimas then noticed him and they're like, listen, this guy is amazing at R&B, would like to actually nominate you for this award. And before we knew it, he won Best R&B at the Afrimas. Now, this was quite a while ago, right? But that process of making sure that you start within your community and you actually go up, you need to also understand what these TV stations and what these radio stations are not necessarily looking for, but how they want things sent to them. Because once you just adhere to how they want their information, you make their jobs easier, right? Yeah. And once you make their jobs easier, it's a lot easier to kind of like work with, because they just know that if we call this guy and we need something, or if he sends us something, everything has been sent correctly. We don't need to really double check or whatever. It takes a shorter time for it to then go up on TV.
Wow. That's amazing. You know, Blah, I wish I could keep you here all day. You've been dropping some crazy, crazy knowledge right here. This is, of course, Baseline Academia. Thank you for everyone who stuck around and listened to this talk thus far. Blah, in about 30 seconds, can you just tell us a little bit more about Masters of the Industry, where people can find you online, just before we wrap up?
Okay, so Masters of the Industry is a platform that is created to making sure that we educate and empower all the artists and artist managers that are on the come up. We're in a place now where we want to start seeing some artists and their teams making real money and becoming profitable. And we've provided tools that will allow you to come on board. www.motiafrica.com. You can find the pages on Instagram, which is Moti Africa, Twitter, Moti Africa, Facebook, Moti Africa. There's a section that's there that allows you to ask a Moti, right? Where you actually send in whatever questions you want. And once every 2 weeks, we get someone who is well-versed in that specific department or area that you need answers to, and they will answer your question. Now, this is a platform that was created by Munyachanetsa, who is one of the biggest music publishers in South Africa right now. And he's just, man, he's done an amazing job in roping in people and making sure that we create a platform that educates. Same thing with what you guys are doing, man. I'm such a fan of you guys because I know that I have to always brush myself up whenever I'm given this opportunity. But definitely, you know, if there are more conferences and workshops that are happening this year, I'm definitely going to make myself available.
Awesome. You're always welcome, and it's always a joy to have you, Blahtee. There you have it, everybody. For those of you who played the tambourine on someone's song 6-7 years ago, yeah, you might be owed some money. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us for this particular talk. We still have plenty more lined up. Stick around. We're going to have some performances later on. Lots of activity happening outside the auditorium.